If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
Now is the time for presenting the awards. We have several, and we actually opened these up for nominations from the membership. The first award to be given away is the Standard Bearer of Liberty. The recipient is honored as the person most responsible for the growth of the party and dedicated to the libertarian cause in New Hampshire. The nominees are Brian McQuaid, Brian Shields, Caleb Dyer, Chip Spangler, Darrell Perry, George Carpenter, Roger Paxton, and the Southern New Hampshire Libertarian Party nominated jointly as a group. The winner of that award is Mr. Roger Paxton, who has promoted liberty in New Hampshire since moving here a couple of years ago from Arkansas. He does various podcasts. He's organizing the Porcupine Freedom Festival. He helped with the Liberty Forum. He helps with the Free Coast Festival. And he's a former chair of LP Arkansas, currently serving as vice chair of the party. Roger, thank you for all of your work for the party. Show everybody that beautiful award. Next, we recognize the Volunteer of the Year. The Volunteer of the Year is an award that goes to the libertarian who went above and beyond to give their time and talents to further the success of the party, and someone who worked above and beyond in an extraordinary fashion and has significantly contributed to the success of a campaign or the party. The nominees, again, these were nominations made by the members of the party. The nominees are Brian McQuaid, Brian Shields, Caleb Dyer, Chip Spangler, George Carpenter, Jim Grenier, Justin Zillard, Mo Egan, and Stephen Nass. The winner, and I see him over there busily working, he's actually the guy that chaired the convention committee. Justin Zillard. Come on, everybody. Get your award. From standing on street corners, waving campaign signs, to canvassing, to, again, organizing this convention, Justin has been available to promote the advancement of liberty in New Hampshire through the incredible donation of his time. Thank you, Justin, for everything you've done for the party. Next, we have the Outreach Award. This is awarded to a party member who worked exceptionally hard to spread the message of libertarian principles to as many potential voters as possible. The nominees are Bernie Gracie, Brian Shields, Caleb Dyer, Chip Spangler, Heather Mullins, Linda Keene, Gilletta Jarvis, and Justin O'Donnell. The winner has spent time recruiting candidates, speaking about the Libertarian Party on social media to various groups, attending fairs and events and festivals across the state, and is also running for governor this year, Gilletta Jarvis. Next, we have the Candidate of the Year. And, well, there weren't a lot of elections in 2017. However, we did have a few candidates that were actually on the ballot in races in 2017. And a couple of the nominees have either run previous to 2017 or are running this year. The nominees are Brian Shields, George Carpenter, Gilletta Jarvis, and Justin O'Donnell. The winner ran in a special election for state rep and wound up doing much better than anyone ever expected he would. Brian Shields, please come on. Well done. And the last award that got voted on is the Office Holder of the Year award. We have 3 wonderful state reps all of whom were nominated: Brandon Finney, Caleb Dyer, and Joseph Stolkop. The Office Holder of the Year award goes to a current elected libertarian that has best promoted libertarian principles and values through public service. The winner, and this was a very, very close vote, the winner was the first of the state reps to step out off of the ledge, if you will, and jump into the Libertarian Party, helping form the Libertarian Caucus of the New Hampshire legislature, the first time we've had a caucus in over 20 years. Mr. Dyer stands by his principles and practices strong communication. Caleb, thank you. Please come get this wonderful award. And lastly is the Chairman's Award for Extraordinary Service, which means that I get to pick one of you to give an award to. And it's basically the chairman gets to select whoever he wants to for whatever criteria he decides. And you know, I'm picking somebody, or rather I chose somebody that wound up, well, really, he's the reason I'm standing right here today. I wound up a couple of years ago getting an email from Roger saying, hey, I've got a friend that wants to start an affiliate out here on the Seacoast. Can you help us? And that man was Brian McQuaid.
Woo! Yes!
And so I wound up getting in touch with Brian and said, I'd love to come out and do whatever I can to help. So I showed up, and what, there were half a dozen people at your house on that
10 people.
About 10 people showed up on that first meeting that they had for forming LPC Coast. And I wound up just basically overseeing, making sure that they did everything by the books, if you will. And Brian really encouraged me to wind up running for chair. And it's because of Brian, again, that I'm here as chair. Brian has done an amazing job as membership director. As he said, since the current EC has been formed, membership has doubled. And I anticipate it's just going to continue to rise. Again, Brian, thank you for all of your hard work. Thanks. And take this beautiful award. Woo! And now we get to the fun part. And by fun, I mean it's hopefully not going to be as painful as I imagine. That's going to be the, oh, well, no, before we get to the painful part that I was thinking of, we have officer elections and elections of delegates to the National Convention. So that part, not going to be painful at all. So we have the chair, the vice chair, secretary, and treasurer as officers to be elected. I will open the floor for nominations for chair. And before anyone stands up to make a nomination, I would like to say that I will not be running for re-election. Mr. Diaz, I saw your hand first.
I nominate Chip Spangler for chair.
Chip Spangler has been nominated for chair. It's been seconded. Do you accept?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell, I saw your hand next.
I was going to nominate Chip Spangler.
Is there anybody that was not going to nominate Chip Spangler? Are there any further nominations for the office of chair? Seeing none, I would like to remind everyone that NOTA is always an option in libertarian elections. Chip, would you like to speak to your nomination?
Got 90 seconds per rules.
Okay.
I'll just be brief. For those of you who don't know me, I am the current chairman of the Southern New Hampshire Libertarian Party. I'm also a former state chair of the Libertarian Party of Maryland, and I am looking forward to continuing the great work that Daryl and the rest of the executive committee have done, if you will elect me. That's all.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of NODA? NODA wishes not to speak on this race. Since there's only one candidate, is there objection to doing a raised hand vote on this?
No.
No objection. All in favor of Chip, raise your hand with your voting card. Any votes for NODA? I will vote for NODA just because I like being a contrarian. Chip, congratulations. The floor is now open for nominations for vice chair. Mr. O'Donnell, you are recognized.
I'd like to nominate Brian Shields.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Shields, do you accept?
Yes.
Are there any further nominations for vice chair? Mr. Light?
I'd like to nominate Rich Tomaso.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Rich, do you accept?
I appreciate it, but I'll have to decline.
Further nominations? Mr. Shields, would you like to speak to your candidacy? You get 90 seconds if you would like to.
I don't really have much to say. I'm currently chair of LPC Coast, and spoken a lot with Chip about the vision for the party for the future, and we work well together, and we will hopefully grow this party to be a contender. Thank you.
Who would like to speak on behalf of NODA? Again, NODA is being silent. All in favor of Brian Shields as vice chair, raise your voter card. All in favor of NODA? Again, Brian, it's because I'm a contrarian. I know you're going to do a wonderful job. The floor is open for nominations for secretary. Cecilia Fairchild is recognized.
I would like to nominate Caleb Dyer.
Nomination of Caleb Dyer. Do you accept, or is there a second?
Second.
I will accept.
Mr. Dyer has accepted, and there were multiple seconds. Are there further nominations for chair? Secretary. It's been a long day. I've not got a lot of sleep this week. Any other nominations for secretary? Seeing none, Mr. Dyer, would you like to speak to your nomination? You can come up here if you want.
No, I will speak from here. I was proud to be the inaugural secretary for SNHLP under the direction of Chip Spangler. And I firmly believe that the work that we did in building that state affiliate, it's hopefully going to be one of the largest soon. But I'm confident that we can continue that at the state level, and I would be honored to serve as the secretary.
Is there anyone who would like to speak on behalf of NODA? All in favor of Caleb Dyer as secretary, raise your voter card. All in favor of NODA? Secretary knows that there were 2 votes for NODA.
Condolences, Caleb. Well played.
You got 3.
3 votes for NODA. Next, we have nominations for treasurer. Mr. O'Donnell is recognized.
I'd like to nominate Tom Kershaw.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Multiple seconds. Tom, do you accept?
I will accept.
Tom will accept for another year on the merry-go-round. Any further nominations for treasurer? Seeing none, reminder that NODA is an option. Tom, would you like to speak to your candidacy?
Thank you. I will, as long as the money stays reasonable and we're not spending a whole lot, I'm happy to continue doing this.
On behalf of NODA, I agree. As long as the money stays reasonable, I think everybody's going to be happy. All in favor of Tom Kershaw as treasurer? All in favor of Noda? Noda has 2 votes.
Condolences.
Next, we are going to elect delegates to the National Convention. Reminder that the National Convention is coming up June 30th through July 3rd in New Orleans. Hold on, I heard something out of my right ear.
She was asking about membership. I said it's not an officer.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a question about committee chairs, specifically the membership committee and judicial committee. Those will be handled after bylaw revisions, just because there might be some modifications depending on what we approve, might be modifications to the makeup of the EC. And instead of then trying to make decisions on whether somebody that's elected a committee chair becomes a different position or something, it will all be handled later. But LP New Hampshire has 11 seats to fill for the National Convention, and in accordance with our current governing document, to be a delegate to the National Convention, one needs to, and let me find the exact wording, one needs to be otherwise eligible to be an officer, with the exception of the person does not have to actually live in the state of New Hampshire. All delegates to the National Convention need to have been members of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire for 180 days prior, or a member of LP National for 2 years. And the person has to also be a current member of LPNH in good standing. Again, we have 11 seats to fill. The floor is open for nominations. Mr. Lombardo?
Nominate Caleb Dyer.
And for the purpose here, we are not going to require seconds, only that the person state that they accept or do not accept the nomination.
I accept.
I'd like to nominate Brandon Fitty.
I do accept.
I nominate AJ Olding. I accept.
Cecilia?
I nominate Justin O'Donnell.
Accept.
Caleb, I saw your hand.
I nominate Robert Lombardo.
Accept.
Lonnie Scott.
You accept?
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Spencer Diaz.
I accept. Nominate Daryl Perry.
I accept. Bonnie?
Nominate Rich Tomaso.
Accept.
Are there further nominations?
Nominate Liz Jarvis.
I accept.
And remember, you can nominate yourself. Mr. Jarvis.
I have 2 nominations.
Okay.
Chip Spangler.
Do you accept?
Yes.
Sorry, I have 2 more. Sorry, that was 3. James Weeks II.
James notified me via email that he would like to be a delegate. He is a member in good standing and qualified to serve as a member of our delegation.
And Thomas Knapp.
Thomas is also eligible to serve and notified me via email that he would like to be a delegate.
And everyone else on my list got nominated.
How many people does that give us total that have been nominated?
That is a total of 13 people.
13 people nominated for 11 seats. Mr. Spangler, can you remind us what the voting procedures are that we adopted earlier today?
Essentially, those are in the convention rules, like in your mountain of paper. Essentially, we are using a form of approval voting where people can vote for as many candidates or as few candidates as they like, regardless of the number of seats filled. That's a good theory summary.
That means that you should have a piece of paper here that says ballot. You have one that looks very similar that says voter card. You should have one that says ballot.
Okay.
If you do not have one that says ballot and you believe that you are eligible to vote, please let me know. Yes?
Are nominations still open?
Nominations are still open.
I'd like to nominate all the members of the current, of the prior executive committee.
So that would be Roger Paxton, who is shaking his head no, Tom Kershaw, who is shaking his head no,
I will not be able to.
and Brian McQuaid also says no.
Thank you for the nomination.
But they all thank you for the nomination. Are there any further nominations? Mr. Kelly?
Ian Freeman? No thanks.
Ian says no. Let me ask the question this way. Is there anyone who would like to be a delegate who has not otherwise been nominated by someone else? Raise your hand. I am seeing no hands raised.
I would, but I haven't been a member for a year.
180 days.
Yeah, only 180 days of
He
LPNH.
just joined today.
Oh.
Fair enough.
Seeing no other nominations, nominations are closed. Madam Secretary, can you read the names of those who have been nominated, please?
Robert Lombardo, Daryl Perry, Rich Tomaso, Brandon Finney, Spencer Diaz, Andrew Olding, Bonnie Scott, Chip Spangler, James Weeks, Caleb Dyer, Justin O'Donnell, Thomas Knapp, Gilletta Jarvis.
Point of information.
Point of information.
Earlier, Spencer nominated AJ Olding. That is also Andrew Olding, and that is who I am. So, I just wanted to
Andrew AJ Olding.
Thank you for the clarification.
No, I mean, she said Andrew, and I was nominated as AJ, and I just want that to be clear.
We're putting all the names on the ballot.
It's fine.
So there's a question about, do you put all the names on the ballot? If you do that, then please clearly identify who you are voting for. It would be easiest for the vote counters if you only list the people for whom you are voting.
Daryl,
So could you,
is it appropriate if I spoke about a delegate that, can I speak?
There's a discussion.
Can I discuss for a second?
What is to be discussed about the delegate?
I wanted the membership to be aware that 2 of the nominees, particularly James Week and Thomas Knapp, are not residents of New Hampshire, and that might affect, that information might have some effect on their vote.
Correct. So two of the people, as mentioned, James Weeks and Thomas Knapp, do not live in New Hampshire. However, they are eligible to serve as delegates.
Sure, that information I thought was, and that James Week is the dancing naked guy, so.
Point us out of order.
But you're hurt, right? That's the important part.
could you repeat the names one more time? You're not going to have the delegate
That's okay.
speak, right?
Robert Lombardo, Daryl Perry, Rich Tomaso, Brandon Finney, Spencer Diaz, Andrew AJ Olding, Bonnie Scott, Chip Spangler, James Weeks, Caleb Dyer, Justin O'Donnell, Thomas Knapp, Gilletta Jarvis.
Thanks.
And if I could employ Mr. Sheets and Mr. Demarest to serve as ballot clerks on this, that would be wonderful. Once you are done filling out your ballot, please raise it in the air and one of these 2 gentlemen will come around to pick it up.
I remember the name again. Could you read that list one more time, Gilletta? We still have some.
Yep. It is Robert Lombardo, Daryl Perry, Rich Tomaso, Brandon Finney, Spencer Diaz, Andrew AJ Olding, Bonnie Scott, Chip Spangler, James Weeks, Caleb Dyer, Justin O'Donnell, Thomas Knapp, Gilletta Jarvis. Yep. Brian over there. Steve. Brian Shields. Brian Shields and Stuart.
There's a couple of people in the back.
Okay then.
Mr. Demarest, there's somebody right behind you and then someone here in front. And while we are waiting on the tabulation of those results, again, as a reminder, per the rules that we adopted this morning, a modified form of approval voting shall be utilized for selection of delegates. Members shall be able to vote for as many or as few candidates as they choose. There shall be no ranking of the candidates after the tabulation of ballots. Candidates shall be awarded the position of delegate in descending order of votes. After all delegate positions have been filled, up to 50 remaining candidates shall be declared as alternate in descending order of votes. The candidate must receive at least 10% of the vote to become either a delegate or an alternate. And while we're waiting on that to be tabulated, per our current governing documents, it is in order to nominate candidates, even though I know officially we don't nominate until the primary. However, in some states where that is an option for libertarians, the party does opt to officially nominate candidates. That way they can advertise these are the candidates and other people just happen to be using the ballot line.
Are there any more of these out? Going once, twice? David,
if anyone else has a ballot for delegate, speak now or it does not get counted.
David and I are going to start counting.
Thank you. So, does anyone wish to make a nomination for the office of governor? Mr. Lombardo.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Gilletta, I know you're announced as a candidate. Are there others who would like to nominate or be nominated for governor? Seeing none, reminder that NOTA is always an option. Gilletta, would you like to speak to your nomination? Basically, you get 90 seconds to make a campaign pitch.
I reiterate everything I said last year, that as governor I would be fighting to keep all of our rights, lower our taxes, make sure that each one of you has a voice, there's a transparent government, that we are not voting for things like death penalties, and that we are voting for things like cannabis legalization and no more sobriety checks and other violations of your Constitution.
Would anyone like to speak on behalf of NOTA?
Yes.
Mr. Babiars, you are recognized, and per our rules, you have 90 seconds.
So being a libertarian, we have the idea of concept of being a self-ownership. And as such, we also believe in self-governance. And if you believe in that, then NOTA is the most appropriate course of action. However, in the reality, we have a system of governance today that uses a monopoly on violence. Let me further state that as NOTA, if you believe that's wrong, vote for NOTA. But do what I am going to do, and I'm going to vote for Gilletta, because I know she will fight the violence.
It sounds as though Noda attempted to withdraw, however, per the bylaws and governing document, Noda is always an option. All those in favor of nominating Gilletta Jarvis as governor, raise your ballot card. All those in favor of Noda. Again, I'm a contrarian, note there are two. There is not a U.S. Senate election this year, however, as happens every 2 years, U.S. House for District 1 and District 2 are both up. I know that we have someone who has announced and been campaigning for District 2. Let's open nominations for that. Ms. Jarvis, you are recognized.
Justin O'Donnell. Second.
Moved and seconded. I'm waiting for a head nod.
Second.
Mr. O'Donnell accepts. Are there further nominations for U.S. Congress District 2? Seeing none, as a reminder, Noda is always an option, and I'm going to ask this time, would anybody like to speak on behalf of Noda before we give the floor to the human candidate? Would the human candidate like to speak?
A lot of you know me. There are a few new faces that
You can come up here.
Get those steps.
Thank you. Almost everyone here knows me at this point. I've been involved heavily since I moved to New Hampshire. Spent a lot of time up with Representatives Dyer and Finney at the State House, lobbying and testifying on the bills that they've put forth and trying to help actually affect change and progress towards liberty in our lifetime here in New Hampshire. I'm running for U.S. Congress because I think we can make a difference, and it's a race where we can make our voices heard, where we may not stand a chance financially of actually making the impact to win this year, but we can grow, we can use the opportunity to recruit, we can use the opportunity to make our message heard, and I'm running so that if we do this continuously, if we keep having strong candidates with a strong message, that at some point in my lifetime, in my future, the next generation, people like Spencer Dias, will be able to win these elections. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
All those in favor of nominating Justin O'Donnell for District 2 Congress, raise your voter card. All those in favor of Noda. Noda has 3 votes. Are there any nominations for District 1 Congress? Mr. Dyer is recognized.
I would nominate Rich Ball. Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Szilard. Justin.
Yes.
Who is the person that sent the email to you and I stating that he would also like to run for District 1?
Let me double check.
He had registered for the convention and sent an email late yesterday saying he would not be able to attend.
Is it Dan Belforty?
Dan, what was the last name?
Belforty.
Dan Belforty, he is a member of the party, stated that he would like to also run for District 1 Congress. So I will officially nominate him, and Justin can verify that he did send that email. And it's been seconded. Since he is not here, is there anyone who would like to speak on his behalf? And then Rich, you will get to speak second. Yes, Mr. Dyer.
I will speak on Dan Belforty's behalf.
Okay.
Oh, present? Okay. I thought the guy who's in the room was probably good.
So someone gets to, for 90 seconds, pitch him.
I felt it was appropriate that it was I who spoke on behalf of Mr. Belforty because I made the nomination for the other candidate in the race. Either one of them would be wonderful candidates, I believe. Okay. Well, anyhow, Mr. Belforty, I met him in Massachusetts not too long ago, and he impressed me very much. We had some very good policy discussions, and I think he would be a tremendous fit for nominee for 1st District. And that is all.
Mr. Paul, would you like to speak to your candidacy?
Hi, my name is Rich Paul, and I'm oh, sorry, wrong place. Hi, my name is Rich Paul, and I'm running for Congress. Some of you know who I am. I've been an activist for a long time. I started the 420 rally in Keene, where for 3 years we were going out, weather permitting, at 4:20 in the afternoon and publicly smoking on the town common. I was arrested a couple of times during that, and it continued. I also have appropriate experience. I'm a convicted felon. I've been a small-time criminal for many years, and I think I'm ready for the big leagues. And I want to go to Congress, and I want to fight for the common people. I want to fight for elimination of the poverty that is caused by government regulation. I want to fight the unemployment that is caused by government regulation. I want to fight against the drug war. I want to fight against the foreign wars. And I want to fight for fair ballot access across the United States so that libertarians can get on any ballot and win.
And a reminder that NOTA is an option. Would anyone like to speak on behalf of NOTA for Congress 1? Seeing none. And since we have 3 candidates on this, should we do paper ballot or show of hands?
Do we restrict it to if you're in the district?
There's a question about do you have to live in the district for U.S. Congress? You only have to live in the state. There does not appear to be anyone supporting or making motion for paper ballot on this, so all in...
No, paper ballot is by default.
Paper ballot is by default, thank you.
Yeah, that's what the rules say. So, what's that? You can suspend the rules and do that, yes.
Would you like to motion to suspend the rules to do show of hands?
I won't, but...
Okay. So you should have 1 extra paper ballot. Yes, Mr. Dias.
Motion to suspend the rules of, just rules.
Motion to suspend the rules to allow show of hand ballot on this. It's been moved and seconded. This requires 2/3 majority. All in favor, raise your voter card. Opposed? That does not appear to have the requisite majority. It appears that our vote counters are still counting votes on the other election, but go ahead and everybody should have 1 extra paper ballot. We will wind up getting extra pieces of paper for those that need to vote later. Yes, Mr. Olding?
This is just one person we're voting for. We're not doing approval like Google.
Correct. This is a single candidate. You vote for 1. The candidates are Dan Belforti, Rich Paul, and NOTA. We are doing paper ballot. Alex Merced, could I employ you to be vote counter on this, please?
Sure, no problem. Okay.
Excellent. Joe Hoffman is also going to assist on that. And do we know the status of...
They're close. They had a question on some of the...
Okay.
Some of the
apparently they are getting very close to having a final count on delegates to the National Convention. With that, while candidate nominations are still open, we have 24 state Senate seats, 5 executive council seats, and 400 state rep seats. So instead of going through every district, let me ask, is anyone planning to run for executive council that would like to be officially nominated? Brian Chabot, which district? 5. District 5. Mr. Tomaso, I believe you're District 4?
Correct.
Anyone else for executive council?
Thank you.
Seeing none, would Mr. Chabot, would you like to speak to your candidacy?
I've been part of the Libertarian Party for many years now. Been a resident of New Hampshire since 1990. I'd like to give the people a seat on the executive council. Basically, it's 1/5. We represent 1/5 of the state, and I'd like to put a little bit of transparency to it. One of my plans is to start a blog specifically for it, to let everybody know what's going on and let you put your input on it. So please vote for me, Executive Council, District 5.
Mr. Tomaso, would you like to speak to your candidacy?
Sure. I ran for this position last year. I got 5, almost 6% of the vote, spending less than $100. So hopefully I'll spend a little more money. I think I was invited to a debate. I couldn't make it. So most executive council, nobody pays any attention to it, even though it controls all the money and nominations. So yeah, if I have the pleasure of serving on the executive council, know that I will be a taxpayer's friend and steward of the state's money, and making sure the governor's nominees will actually do their job and have high ethical standards. Thank you.
Ms. Jarvis, you are recognized.
I apologize, but I wasn't able to get my hand up fast enough. We have another person who wants to run for Executive Council in District 1. Okay. Tobin Menard. And I can speak to him too. That's me. Oh, you're right there. Okay, never mind.
I was going to say, I know he registered for the convention. Mr. Dias, you're recognized.
Point of information, what district is Tomaso running in?
He's Executive Council District 4.
Is there any votes left?
Yeah. Sorry, are there any votes left for the congressional?
There should not be. Those all should have been handed over to you already. Do you have a result?
Yes, we do.
Yep. So, okay. So,
We have a result in the CD1 nomination.
okay, so Rich Paul had 12, Noda had 12, and Dab before he had 11. Very good.
We have no winner. Per the rules that we adopted earlier,
That's why we asked.
we do require a majority, since this technically, we are not required to nominate a candidate, so we could opt to just not have an official candidate nominated in convention and allow the primary process to play out, or we could have a runoff. Ms. Fairchild?
I motion not to have a nominee.
There's been a motion to not have an official nominee that has been seconded. All in favor of the motion to not have an official nominee, raise your yellow voter card. All opposed? That appears to pass. We have an update from the membership director.
We have 2 more delegates who are here now, so we have 43 total delegates. That means for 7/8 vote, that will be 38. 3/4 vote will be 33. 2/3 will be 29, and simple will be 22.
Thank you. So we will now move to official nominations for Executive Council 1. The candidates are Tobin Menard and Noda. Mr. Jarvis, are you asking to be recognized?
That's okay, I'll let him speak for himself.
Would you like to speak very briefly, because I just realized you did not get a chance to speak?
I just figured I wanted to run and make sure we were represented. That's.
Thank you. All in favor of Tobin Menard for Executive Council 1? Any votes for Noda? 2 votes for Noda. There are no candidates for Executive Council 2 or 3. All in favor of Rich Tomaso for Executive Council 4? Any for Noda? 1. Brian Chabot for Executive Council 5. All in favor? Any for Noda? There is 1. Is anyone planning to run for State Senate?
Yes.
Yes. We have people planning to run for State Senate. Gilletta, if you could read that list.
We'd like to nominate Ian Freeman for District 10.
Ian Freeman for State Senate District 10. I will second. You accept? Sure. You're already on the state website, which means that at some point you expressed some interest. That's it for State Senate. Anyone else interested in running for State Senate? Seeing none, Mr. Freeman, would you like to speak to your candidacy?
It's probably just going to be more of a media candidacy. I'm not going to put a whole lot of effort into it. So if there's somebody else who really wants to put a bunch of effort into it, please, you can have it.
Would anyone like to speak in favor of Noda that did not speak for Mr. Freeman?
He is definitely.
It sounded like he almost spoke for Noda. All in favor of Ian Freeman for State Senate 10? All in favor of Noda? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like 8, I think. State rep, I know we have several that are planning to run for state rep. Brian, if you could read that list, either Brian or Jaleel want to read that list.
Sure, I'll get that. Okay, Carroll 6, Brody DeShays. Cheshire 9, Nick Ray. Cheshire 16, Mr. Darrell W. Perry. Hillsborough 1, Keith Cobbett. Hillsborough 2, Lisa Wolber, longtime LPNH member. Hillsborough 6, Richard Manzo. Hillsborough 7, Spencer Diaz. Hillsborough 37, of course, Caleb Dyer.
I've heard of that guy.
Hillsborough 40, Mark Lynn. Rockingham 20, Mr. Osterman, Forrest Osterman. Rockingham 21, Michael Baldassare. Stratford 1, if she's still interested, I'm not sure. My wife, Tanya Butler. Stratford 9, Justin Keenan. Stratford 12, Robert Stacy, and Stratford 24, Representative Finney.
Are there other candidates or people interested in being candidates for state rep? Mr. Light.
Myself, COAS 3.
COAS 3.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's been moved and seconded, and technically I don't know if self-nominations need to be seconded. Anyone else interested in running for state rep? Mr. Shields.
Stratford 19.
Brian Shields, Stratford 19. Not resting on your laurels as candidate of the year. Any others? And since we have a large number, I would like to do this as a single vote instead of going person by person unless there is objection to doing so. All in favor of nominating the slate here of state rep candidates, raise your voter card. All opposed? Seeing none. I don't believe there are any other elections up later this year. If there are, someone please inform me. Yes, Ms. Jarvis.
Stuart and Rich Could I get from both of you a photo, a headshot photo, and Brian as well, a new headshot, as well as your websites, any links for your campaign stuff so I can put it on our state website?
Basically, she wants some contact info so it can go on the website. If you have that, that would be greatly appreciated. The next item on the agenda, and we'll go ahead and move on to that while we await the results of the election of national delegates. We have revision of the Constitution and bylaws, and immediately followed by amendments to. Mr. Spangler, if you would like to come up and give the report on that.
One thing I'd like to do really quick before we get started is the two agenda items, the revision and the amendments. I would like to ask if, as long as there's no objection, to combine those into one thing, because as soon as the revision is passed, any amendments would be out of order based on the proposed bylaws. So, but as we go through the revision, you can propose changes at that time. But once the bylaws are passed, they're in effect immediately. Is how it works. Is there any objection to changing the agenda so that those two are one single item? Okay.
I see none.
Okay. So, on behalf of the Constitution, Bylaws, and Rules Committee, we decided to basically take the existing Constitution and bylaws and merge them into one document. This is essentially how organizations are normally operating nowadays. In the past, you used to have a separate Constitution and separate bylaws, and nowadays you normally have one document, normally called the bylaws. The other governing document you might have, which some organizations do, is an Articles of Incorporation. But essentially you have that, and you have a set of bylaws, and then you have rules, like convention rules that we passed, or any other special rules of order that we might pass. And those rules are what take place of what currently are our bylaws, essentially. So what we've done is we've hopefully taken the best of the existing Constitution, the best of the existing bylaws, and added our own material, we the committee, and created this proposed bylaws revision for you. What we are going to do is go through it by paragraph, which is a procedure under Robert's Rules. And we'll consider each part one at a time. And it doesn't have to be voted on, each part, but we discuss each part as far as an individual part, as far as if there are any amendments or discussion on those individual parts. And then once that's done, we move on to the next part. Once we've finished everything, we'll vote on the entire revision. Now, based on the current Constitution, I believe it requires a 3/4 vote. And we'll get to how things will be amended in the future, but that's what we'll need for this revision. Are there any questions before we get started going through by paragraph? Okay, so if you turn, the proposed revision is in your document. It's after the convention rules that we discussed this morning. So,
And it is a 3/4.
3/4. Yes. So I'm just going to go ahead. We're going to start with Article 1. This is essentially just transferred straight from the old Constitution. The party needs a name, so that's a useful thing. Is there any discussion on this portion of the revision? Hearing none, we'll move on. Article 2 is also directly taken from the old Constitution. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we are moving on. Article 3 is taken from several portions of the old documents. Basically, this is both the purpose and the principles that are stated. And if folks are curious, it does have the existing portion where it requires a 7/8 vote as far as changing the principles are concerned. Is there any discussion on Article 3? Okay, hearing none, moving on. We're in Article 4, Structure and Definitions. Essentially, this establishes the governing structure of the party, in Part A. Part B is a portion that I imported from the Libertarian Party of Maryland Constitution. As I said, I was a state chair in Maryland before, and I didn't write it, but I think it's appropriate because we want to be an inclusive party, and sometimes you may have a male or female pronoun used, and it's not obviously exclusively male or female. So that is for Part B. Is there any discussion on that part?
Is it not more appropriate to just use non-gender pronouns in here instead of specifying it out?
We can't use it, and the use of a singular they can be problematic legally. So I mean, when it's possible, we've taken pronouns out entirely, but when it was appropriate, we've used either the male or the female pronoun throughout the bylaws.
Okay.
All right. So, any other discussion on that part? Okay, we're moving on to Article 5. We're going to look at Part A, which is essentially also directly taken from the old documentation. Any discussion on that? Basically, we believe in the non-aggression principle.
You're considering all of Article 5?
We're going through section by section, so this is just Part A to start.
Actually,
Go ahead.
you are moving on, but I just think the and should be an or in Article 4B, the bylaws, special rules of order, or any other party documentation, instead of an and. You can move on if you don't agree.
Okay. Well, we can go back to that, it's fine. So you're moving that we replace the and before any other party documentation with or, is that correct?
I don't want to make a big deal about it, but
Well, are you making a motion? That's my question.
no, it's okay.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay.
It wasn't moved.
Listen, people agree.
I'll motion for the amendment.
Okay.
Well, it was already moved by Mr. Carpenter.
I'll second then.
No, it's
Mr. Finney seconded.
okay.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Would someone like to speak in favor of this motion?
It appears to be just plain simple language. The fact of the matter is and any versus or any.
Yeah. It's a grammar thing.
Anybody like to speak
It's
against?
grammar.
Grammatically, or any party documents, still include all the other party documents.
All right. Well, the motion is to change from and to or, so. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, I'll just ask, is there any objection to accepting this amendment? Hearing none, that is done. So, okay, back to Article 5, Part A. Is there any discussion on this portion?
I'd like to move to make an amendment. Brian Lombardo from Salem. I would like to move that we remove the words do not believe in from the first sentence of Part A, because the initiation of force functionally does exist as factual line of action, and this statement is present on the website and other documentation that is affiliated with the party, and people who are annoying and very literal will see this and might not agree to the statement and might not join the party because of it.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
With the amendment
I believe the motion is to delete
Believe
the
in
word.
or.
The word
Delete,
or?
believe in or.
Yeah,
Believe in or.
Not the
delete
not.
the words believe in or in the first line.
Do not advocate for, okay.
So. Is there further discussion on this? For or against?
Against as it is, because grammatically that doesn't make sense.
Not advocate.
That they do not advocate.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's
I'm sorry,
That's
that's actually what I think.
All right.
I actually would agree with amending the first sentence because we don't want to come across as a party that we are policing someone's thoughts. It only matters that they're advocating an action. So I would agree with the amendment.
Mr. Rowling?
So if you believe that the initiation of force is okay, then you fundamentally don't believe in the most core principles or even the pledge of the party of libertarianism. The pledge of the party, which I don't remember off the top of my head, it's essentially the non-aggression principle. And if you don't believe in that, then you're not a libertarian. I don't know how else, like, I'm so confused how anyone can have an anger about this.
Can I add to that? As long as there's nobody else who wants to speak. Okay. You and then.
Okay. The only thing that I would say in that is that we are a political party, so we're using the vehicle of trying to get people elected to change policy. We're not, trying to so much promote philosophy per se. We're trying to structure how our political party is made up. So in this way, even if you're someone who believes in socialism, but you're not advocating the use of force to implement that, I don't see a violation there. But if you're advocating strictly the violation of someone's rights and property, then you're not a adherent to the principles of the party.
Motion to move to the previous question. There's a motion to end debate. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay. A second? Okay. All in favor of ending debate, please raise your voter cards. All opposed, please raise your voter cards. Okay. Motion carries. Okay. The amendment on the floor is to, to delete which words?
Okay.
Believe in.
To delete the words believe in or, so that it reads, all party members must certify that they do not advocate the initiation of force,
Et cetera, et cetera.
et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your voter cards. All right. All those opposed, please raise your voter cards. All right. Motion passes. So, let's see. All right, we are on to, we're going to go ahead and consider Part B, or Section B, Part 1, Basic Membership. Essentially what this portion is a section that these people are not dues-paying members, but they want to be affiliated with the party in one way. They want to go on our mailing list or be informed of what's going on or that type of thing, but they're not necessarily yet ready to commit to being a dues-paying member. They are not permitted to be delegates to the convention, for the record, but this is a way to give somebody basically a step in to the party. Is there any discussion on this section?
Does it, maybe I just don't see it, does it acknowledge that they are non-voting?
That's mentioned later
on. So my only, I guess, concern with this section is the part where it says people that have notified the Secretary of State, or wait, no, the Secretary of I misread and thought it said Secretary of State was going to say that they don't give us list of people that register as libertarians, so it could possibly wind up making things difficult. So never mind, I misread.
Okay.
I'm not ready.
You need a nap, Daryl.
You don't have to.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we are moving on to Part 2, General Membership.
Before we do, Mr. Sheets and Demarest, do you have results?
We do.
Okay.
We have results for the election of delegates to the National Convention. The number of ballots. He would be delegate for veterans 12. We have 11 delegates, and then we can have alternates, so he would be an alternate.
Two, that's not 10%.
Okay, we have the results here, and I'll read them in order of votes. Caleb Dwyer, Chip Spangler, Darrell Perry, Gilletta Jarvis, Justin O'Donnell, Robert Lombardo, Brandon Finney, Spencer Diaz, Bonnie Scott, Andrew Olding, and Richard Tomaso. And those are the 11 delegates. We have one alternate, and the alternate is James Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Demarest and Mr. Sheets, for counting the votes. And Madam Secretary, here is the tally sheet.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and resume discussion of the bylaws revision. So, we are on Article 5, Section B, Part 2. This is general membership. This is essentially the standard membership of the party. And essentially this is basically somebody who, as is now, pays their dues, pays their annual dues, and becomes a member. So, is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we are moving on to Part 3, which is youth membership. Essentially what youth membership is it's sort of a method of having a student membership, but it is also essentially done by age as opposed to whether or not somebody's a student. I do not want to exclude people who leave high school and immediately enter the workforce, because those are still the people who are less likely to have a lot of money stored up, and I do not want any impediments to them joining the party. Is there any discussion on Part 3?
Is there any way to change the name from youth membership? I don't think a person who's 24 years of age wants to be called a youth.
Well, they can pay the big money.
I'd like to motion to change the name of youth member to beginning member, or something different than youth.
Junior?
I was trying to open it up for discussion, so I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, junior member. Junior member is good.
So what exactly is the wording of your...
Change the title of youth member, any place it states youth member, to junior member.
That's worse.
I'd rather, you can go in as a junior apprentice, a junior, and be you could be 50 years old, it doesn't matter, but a youth, it makes me think of my 8-year-old.
The two youths.
That was second, right?
Yeah, it was second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to replace the word youth in all of Part 3, and I'm going to say anywhere else in the bylaws that it is referred to, with the word junior. Is there discussion on the motion? Would you like to speak to your motion?
I don't think that anyone who is 24 years of age or 25 years of age or anything above 18 wants to be called a youth at this point in their lives. Junior, I think, could work. I'm open to that being changed because you can be a junior apprentice at age 50, and it just means before something. It doesn't have the same implication as youth, which makes me think of 8 years old.
Seeing that I am a junior,
I like to think this is all in good faith. However, being called a junior feels like a Happy Meal kind of thing. Like, this is exactly what I believe in. So I like the word youth a lot better than junior. It feels a lot more adult-like, even though it's supposed to be opposite, youth and adult. So I would vote against this motion to amend.
I'd like to offer a substitute amendment of young adults, perhaps, is better.
Would like to point out that this membership is available to people under 18. So.
But if they're old enough to want to be a member, we can consider them young
Okay,
adults.
so you're moving to...
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We have an amendment to the amendment on the floor right now. So, to replace the word junior with the words young adult. Is there discussion on the amendment to the amendment?
Why would we take anybody's?
I like to motion to amend that.
It's out of order.
You can't have an amendment to the amendment to the amendment.
You have to vote on this.
Yes.
Okay.
So, was the can I ask about the intent of the bylaw? Is that in order? Yeah, I'll call that in order. Is the intent that you wanted to give the executive board the ability to have a separate due structure for members below a certain age? That is correct. Regardless of what you called it? Yes. Yeah, the intent is to give those basically who are under 25 years a discounted membership so that money is not an obstacle to them becoming a member of the party, a dues-paying member. I have a comment, but I think it's out of order. So. Currently, we have an amendment to the amendment on the floor. So the current amendment to the amendment is to replace the word junior with the word young adult. Ever specified.
I like the word young adult a lot better, or the phrase young adult a lot better, as it doesn't necessarily specify a person being a junior. However, it still has the aspect of someone having youth within them. However, it's also saying that they are mature enough to be called an adult. So it's a happy medium.
Yeah, I mean, what are the potential implications of people who are 16 being, is there any issues we have there by calling them adults?
Well, can they legally sign a pledge for anything at 16?
It's a club membership.
Yeah. So no.
Not to my knowledge. But no. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? All right, hearing none, we are going to vote on the amendment to the amendment, which is to replace the word junior as specified in this section and this part and other sections of the bylaws with the word young adult. All those in favor, please raise your voter cards. Okay. All those opposed, please raise your voter cards. Motion passes. We now have the amendment on the floor is to replace the word youth with the words young adult in this part and throughout the bylaws. Is there any discussion?
I don't see any age limitations anywhere else in the bylaws. As I read this, if you can sign your name at age 3, you can join the party. Which young adult does not apply.
Just speaking into, well, signing your name at the age of 3, it's probably worth noting that individuals under the age of 18 can be emancipated from their parental oversight. They can't speak for themselves. They can't make decisions on their own depending on their sort of legal status. I don't think this is necessarily the worst game changing the world. As someone who is 24, I like young adult better than youth member to apply to someone like me and 10 times better than junior. So,
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, hearing none. The amendment on the floor is to change the word youth with the words young adult in this part and throughout the bylaws. All in favor, please signify by raising your cards. Okay, All those opposed, please signify by raising your cards. Motion passes. Okay. We have a delegate update.
We now have 45 delegates.
Woo!
7-8 would be 40 for our purposes right now. We 3/4 vote. We need 34. 2/3 would be 30, and simple 23.
Okay, we're moving on to part 4 of this section, which is sustaining membership.
Beforehand.
Oh, hang on.
We're actually back at 43, and I need to reassess because the Paxton's left.
Okay, we're going to go on to part 4, which is sustaining membership. In short, essentially this is a member who is making recurring donations to the party. We want to encourage recurring donations. I mean, money is sort of the lifeblood of politics, money and volunteers. And so we do want to recognize them as being more than your general member. And so this allows the executive committee to essentially recognize these people who are basically greatly helping the party with monthly donations. Is there any discussion on this? Yeah, I was reading this, I had a question. So is this an arbitrary is the wrong word, but if someone donates every 3 or 4 months, could they be considered a sustaining membership? It doesn't have to be, and I ask this because later on in Article C, you make reference to monthly donations, but you don't make reference to them here. So is the intent that it doesn't have to be monthly? The intent is it doesn't have to be monthly. That is an oversight on Part C, which we'll correct when we get to that. But the idea is that we initially created monthly. We decided to change it to be recurring so that if somebody wants to make a larger donation every 2 or 3 months, then we won't necessarily incur credit card fees or anything like that more than we would otherwise need to. So, but yeah, that's an oversight on Part C, which we will entertain a motion to correct when we get there. Any further discussion on Part 4? All right, hearing none, we're moving on to Part 5, which is life membership. We now have another update.
Yeah, so we sit currently at 43, so 38 for 7/8 vote, 33 for the 3/4 vote, 29 2/3, and 22 7.
Okay, so the life membership is, for purposes otherwise in the bylaws, the life membership is actually one of the other previous memberships, but it is also recognized as a separate thing because we do appreciate the contributions of life members and we do recognize them in that way as well. So it's mentioned in here officially. This entire section in part is because you should have the membership structure of your organization in the bylaws. This is generally a very basic thing that organizations should always do. So this entire section does specify all of that. This entire article, for that matter, specifies all of these things. Is there any discussion on the section about life membership? Hearing none, we are moving on to Part C, which, as was briefly mentioned before, gives the Executive Committee the power to determine the dues, both for for annual dues and the required for monthly donations, which I will entertain a motion to correct that.
So moved.
Okay. I'll make a motion to change monthly donations. Sustaining membership donations. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Motion is to change the word monthly to the word sustaining in Part C. Is there any discussion on this?
I'd like to amend the amendment. Just to change that word to recurring, because that way it could be every 3 months or twice a year, what have you.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to amend the amendment to change it to the word recurring. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
The current motion on the floor is to amend the amendment to change the proposed sustaining to the word recurring. Is there any discussion on this?
I will speak against that because we were talking about the level of membership dues. So I believe the bylaws should be referring to the level of membership to which it's referring. Saying you have a recurring membership may not meet the same requirements for the sustaining membership. So that was the point behind the original amendment.
I will point out to the body that in part 4, it does use the word recurring repeatedly. I believe that motion was, the amendment to the amendment was made in part to keep that wording consistent. Bonnie?
I would speak against that because it's, the way it's phrased in C, it's saying you're determining the levels for recurring donations. I'm sure you'd gladly accept recurring donations that don't meet the level of sustaining membership, but it wouldn't get them sustaining membership. So I like what Rich was saying there.
Is there any discussion in favor of the amendment to the amendment? Okay, the current wording is the executive committee shall determine the annual membership dues, required levels for monthly donations, and the requirements for life membership. There was an amendment to change the word monthly to sustaining. So
Sustaining membership was the actual amendment.
So to change monthly donations?
Yes, to change it from monthly donations to sustaining membership donations.
Right.
Okay, so the amendment is to change it for required levels for monthly donations, change that to required levels for sustaining membership donations.
So replace the word donations with
get rid of the word donation, sorry.
Okay. So required levels for sustaining memberships. Is that correct? And there is an amendment to that amendment.
To change it to?
To change it, I believe, to recurring donations.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, the motion on the floor is to amend the amendment to change the proposed change so that it says required levels for sustaining memberships and change that to be required levels for recurring donations. All those in favor, please raise your voter cards. Okay, all those against, please raise your voter cards.
Which are we voting on again?
The amendment to the amendment, the one that says recurring donations.
Okay, motion fails. We now have on the floor the amendment, which is to change required levels for monthly donations to required levels for
Sustaining members.
sustaining
memberships.
Sustaining memberships. Is there any further discussion?
I have a potential amendment.
Okay.
How about the executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all memberships listed in Article 5, Section B?
Except for it's also section.
Section B covers the entire list of memberships.
Second.
So they would determine the amount and frequency of requirements for all memberships.
Isn't that on C?
It doesn't specify, it just says all of these that are already here together.
Okay, did you get the wording from that? You have the wording? Prepared?
I want to make sure I read it right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me announce that real quick. Okay, the motion on the floor is to change Part C to say the executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all memberships listed in Article 5. I'm going to add Section B to this. And that's been seconded?
Yes.
All right. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this proposed amendment?
Call the question.
He raised his hand first. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, as you just read that, I don't think I heard the word dues included anywhere as you just read it. rather important word.
Membership dues, yep.
Okay. Where would that be inserted?
Right here after memberships, for all membership dues listed in Article.
Are you proposing an amendment to the amendment?
I would, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I have the wording in front of me to know exactly where to insert it.
So we haven't voted on the amendment. Because this is an amendment
this
to
is
the
an amendment
amendment.
to
This
the
is an
amendment.
amendment to the amendment.
All right. This is an amendment to the amendment, therefore your motion is out of order, unfortunately. So.
But if we pass it.
Can we reread the proposal on the floor, please?
Can you go ahead and do that?
Current one is motion to change the words monthly donations to sustaining memberships.
Well, that's the amendment.
That's the amendment. The amendment to the amendment failed. And now the current one, oh, sorry, is the executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all memberships listed in Article 5, Section B.
So if I understand correctly, I'm going to try and summarize here. There's an attempt to insert the word dues into that, and that's out of order at this time because Brian's proposal is technically an amendment to the amendment. Did you?
Can I change it to that?
Well, that would be out of order at this
Can you
time.
withdraw it?
You can ask for permission to withdraw it at this time.
Can I have permission to withdraw it and then?
Is there any objection to Mr. Shields withdrawing his amendment to the amendment? Okay, done. Would you like to make a motion, sir?
Can I make a motion to insert dues as to my prior amendment?
Sure.
There.
Now it's the frequency of dues.
Well, I was going to
So
clarify.
the new one would be, the executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all membership dues listed in Article 5, Section B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will move to a vote on the amendment to the amendment. So, did you have? All right. All in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please signify by raising your voter card. Thank you. All opposed, please signify by raising your voter card. That passes. We now have an amendment on the floor.
Which is this?
Can you please reread the amendment one more time, please?
To change Article 5, Section C to read, the executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all membership dues listed in Article 5, Section B. And the requirements for life membership. Oh, no, sorry, we removed that. Sorry, I thought I was going back. I'm
No.
combining two different amendments here now.
Okay.
So it ends at Article 5, Section B.
Should we read that again, please?
The executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all membership dues listed in Article 5, Section B.
Yeah, the amendment on the floor is to replace the existing text with what she just read in Part C. Is there? Go ahead.
Is the motion to amend that in order?
Yes.
A motion to amend that to read, in the middle part, dues of the memberships.
So instead of for all membership dues, to have for all dues for memberships?
Dues of the membership levels specified in Section B.
The executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all dues of the memberships listed in Article 5, Section B.
Membership levels.
Membership levels.
You're already implying that by saying you're going back to Section B in Article 5. It's kind of redundant.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. So would you like to speak to your motion?
There are no dues specified in Section B. So referring to them seems kind of that the executive committee setting the dues level are not, they're not. Section B doesn't specify any actual dues.
No, that's what Section C is for.
That's what section C is.
Right, section C gives the executive board to set the actual amount of the dues. Right?
Yes.
But the dues are mentioned in the, under general.
Seeing that we have an hour left in this period to go forward with the Constitution, also seeing that we still have half of the bylaws to go, half of the platform to go through, I move that we see the previous question.
Okay.
Rich, could you just come up here and make sure I'm writing this correctly before I have to read it back to everybody again?
There's a motion to end debate on the amendment to the amendment. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Getting way too in the weeds.
Okay, hang on a second.
Most of our book is the proposed bylaws. You gotta remember that, people.
Requirements for all membership levels listed in Article 5, Section B.
Like, look at this. This is all proposed bylaws. Yeah, we still haven't even finished the platform and that stuff. We have 1 day to do this.
I fully expect
They will withdraw. Okay. He wants to withdraw. The amendment to the amendment. So we're back to voting on but we have to agree to withdraw.
The maker of the motion has requested to withdraw the amendment to the amendment. Is there any objection to that? Okay, the amendment to the amendment is withdrawn. We are back to...
The executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements for all membership dues listed in Article 5, Section B.
Okay, so the amendment is to replace the proposed language in Part C with everything she just read.
Motion to amend to put...
So the question was called on the amendment to the amendment.
Oh,
okay. To put of dues.
For all membership dues. So you want to
right,
change
so
that to
the amount and frequency requirements of dues for memberships. That way the of dues goes before memberships. And I think that does what Mr. Tommaso was hoping to do.
Okay, there's been a motion and seconded. As soon as the secretary finishes reading, I will ask her to read the amendment to the amendment.
The executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements of dues for memberships listed in Article 5, Section B.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this amendment to the amendment? Hearing none, is there any objection to accepting this amendment to the amendment? Hearing none, that passes. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, is there any objection to accepting this proposal as amendment to replace the wording of C with, go ahead and read it one more time.
The executive committee shall determine the amount and frequency requirements of dues for memberships listed in Article 5, Section B.
Is there any objection to that? Good. That's passed. We're on to Part D. Essentially, Part D, I'm gonna try and run through this as fast as I can because I know we're running short on time. Part D is essentially a quick definition defining the levels of membership as dues-paying members. It explicitly excludes the basic membership and mentions the others. The phrase dues-paying members is a much shorter way to list than listing out all the members, and that phrase is used several times throughout the bylaws. Any discussion on this? I don't need to do that. All right, hearing none, moving on to Part E. Essentially what this is this requires the executive committee to give some of the membership dues to the local affiliate. Moving forward, we expect the local affiliate will be doing an awful lot of work as far as the actual politics and outreach and all that stuff, and they need money to do that. So this is simply a way to specify that they will be getting some of the dues money from the members in their area. Any discussion? Okay, moving on to Article 4, officers. Part A lists the officers of the party. It's very exciting. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, moving on to Part B. Part B lists the qualifications of the officers of the party. Also defines the term officer eligible member, which is used several times throughout the bylaws. It is essentially very similar to the existing proposal. I mean, it specifies 182 days instead of 180 because that's exactly 26 weeks and it's simply easier to calculate in some ways. And it also says that it differentiates between whether or not the Libertarian Party is an officially recognized party as far as voter registration is concerned. Any discussion on this section? Hearing none, moving forward, Part C. Now I'm actually going to cover Parts C and D together. Both of them relate to the terms. Go ahead.
Just to clarify,
Go ahead.
For the voter registration piece, do you have to be registered Libertarian at the time you declare or by the convention? I guess, do you have to be,
It says, in the beginning of Part B, it says, shall meet the following criteria at the time of her election or appointment and during her entire time in office.
Okay.
So, okay, we're on Parts C and D. These basically define the terms for the officers. Nothing terribly complicated in that. So, basically, if you have discussion, raise your hand as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep moving forward on this. Okay. Part E is essentially taken directly from the old documentation. It says that basically a person cannot hold two officer positions. Okay, Part F is the duties of the chair. It is essentially basically that the chair is the chief executive officer. Some of this language is taken from the old documentation. Some of this language is taken, I believe, or at least hinted at from other Libertarian Party state constitutions that we've found. Any discussion on that? We are on Article 6, Part F. Chair. Hearing no discussion, we'll move on to the vice chair. One thing that we borrowed from the Colorado Libertarian Party's constitution is that the vice chair is specifically tasked with being the contact point for the affiliates. I think it is good to have somebody specifically designated for that role. Otherwise, the vice chair pretty much does what they've always done. Any discussion? Okay, moving on. Secretary. They do secretary things. So, I think y'all know what the secretary does. So, part 2 of this is, I believe, directly taken from the old Constitution or bylaws. I can't remember which. Any discussion on secretary? Okay, moving on. The treasurer. They do the money stuff. So, it's very exciting. Basically, it says they're responsible for doing what treasurers do. Any discussion on this? Okay, Part J, officer at large. This is a little bit of a change from the previous documentation. Previously, the 5th member of the executive committee was the membership committee chair. We have replaced this with officer at large. The reasoning behind this is because whoever's on the executive committee as the 5th member, we want to utilize their skill set in whatever the best way is, whatever the skills they have. If that's fundraising, that's what they're going to do. If it's membership, that's what they're going to do. If it's volunteer coordination, it's communications, whatever it is, we want to put them in that role. We don't want to restrict it to the membership committee chair. So the position is officer at large. So, is there any question about that?
Yeah, this part about the executive committee shall confirm the officer at large role, that means the executive committee is choosing the officer at large and it's not voted on, right? Or am I reading that incorrectly?
Sorry, say again? The body chooses the officer at large. The executive committee chooses the role that they take, depending on their skill set. So, that make sense?
Yeah, maybe I'm done with it.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Okay, on to Part K. And After looking at this over the past couple days, I kind of realized that Part K is actually probably duplicated in Part N later on down the line. So.
I agree.
Okay.
Can I make a motion to strike it?
Yeah.
I'd like to motion to strike K as it's duplicated in N.
Second? Second?
Point of information, are we re-lettering after striking?
Yes.
I believe the motion on the floor is to delete Part K and to, as appropriate, re-letter and renumber the remaining parts of this section.
Yes.
And also to, I believe there's at least one other part in the bylaws that references the vacancies section, and so that would also be changed appropriately.
Later on.
Okay, is there any discussion on this? Is there any objection? Okay, done. Moving forward. Vacancies. Okay, the vacancies of officers, this section is expanded, and to go into a little bit more detail about what's coming in the future, there is an organization created called the Leadership Board. This is an organization that is essentially above the executive committee. It meets far less frequently, but it includes basically the entire executive board, all of the committee chairs, all of the affiliate chairs, and some other volunteers as well. Basically, it's sort of a board of directors of sorts. The executive committee is still doing the day-to-day operations of the party. But one of the powers that the board has is to fill vacancies of the executive committee. Now, the executive committee is authorized in this section to appoint someone to temporarily do the jobs, to fill the tasks, but the permanent replacement is by the board. Is there any question or discussion on this section? Okay. Hearing none, we're moving forward. It's always a good thing to have an officer recall part. We've put one in. Essentially, the 25%, hopefully it's never used, but we'll see. The 25% requirement is something that I found is relatively consistent, and it's 25% of the delegates who attended the most recent convention. That's what it specifically is, since they are the ones who elected the officers. So, essentially that assigns, that provides for the petitioning process and provides the judicial committee a job to do if necessary.
There would be 11 voting members that are here today, right now.
Okay, that's good enough. Go ahead.
At least 25% of the delegates in number, or those specific people?
He said those specific.
The most recent.
But then that means you need to.
It's 25% of the delegates who attended the most recent convention. So the way I interpret that is I guess it was 45 people is the maximum we had here. So it would be 12 of those specific people, because they're the ones who voted in the officer.
Point of information, wouldn't you then need to make the delegate list public? Is that part of the plan, or?
Well,
because the signatures would be verified by the executive committee, correct? And
Yeah.
we know who the members
I mean, the executive committee has the power to verify who was and was not
If someone were seeking
present.
the recall, they would not necessarily have the list of people they should contact?
Yeah, I mean, the people are here, so.
yeah, but a year, 6 months from now.
To give you the list.
That's not specified. So that's a question for the judicial committee.
Move to amend.
Okay.
At least 25% of the specific delegates.
Okay. So the motion is to amend to insert the word specific before delegates in Part B. There is a second. Would you like to speak on the motion?
I believe I already have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, is there any further discussion on this proposed amendment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
When the word specified delegates, so which delegates in this convention will be specified? which would not be specified, leave 25%.
25% of everyone that was a delegate at this convention.
That's what it said before, but now you
Yeah,
see the word specified, and that means it's some kind of division.
Yeah.
From the chair's perspective, I don't know how I would necessarily interpret that. I'm not sure. Because I mean, my intention when I wrote this was to say that it is 25% of the delegates here. So, and I thought that's what it already said. So.
Motion to move the previous question.
We have a motion to end debate. It's been seconded. Motion is to close debate on this amendment. All in favor, please raise your voter cards.
Who motioned that?
Spencer.
Spencer, thank you.
Thank you. All opposed, raise your voter cards. Okay, debate is over. We'll move to a vote on the amendment. The amendment proposed is to insert the word, is it specified or specific? I'm sorry.
Specific.
Specific before the word delegates in Part B, Part 1 of this section. All those in favor, please raise your voter cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your voter cards. Motion fails. Is there any further discussion on Section M, officer recall? Okay, which is actually, I guess, technically Section L now, but as far as the paperwork goes. Okay, the last section of this article is essentially what I call a catch-all section regarding the powers and duties, and essentially says that any other place where powers and duties are specified in the bylaws and the other documentation, the officers have those powers or duties. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we are moving on to Article 7, Part A. So, okay, so this is basically, this entire article, first part is all about the executive committee, the second part is all about the leadership board, and the third part, which is relatively brief, is a few general statements that apply to both. So, A, executive committee, Part 1, basically says what the purpose of the executive committee is. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we're on to Part 2. Part 2 is the membership of the executive committee, and essentially it says that the members are the officers of the state party, the 5 officers mentioned in the previous article, and we have this section, the most recent previous chair of the state party that served at least 4 months as chair of the state party within the immediately preceding 8 years. This is a little bit of a restriction. Basically what it means is that if somebody simply filled out the last month of a term, they're not eligible to serve on the executive committee. Basically it says you have to serve at least 1/3 of the term, and it also says you have to have served within a recent time period. So, is there any discussion on this?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So you moved that because that was a board member position, and you've eliminated it as a board member position and just sort of reassigned it to a committee position?
The executive committee is you guys.
Right,
So,
but you've gone from where we were in officers, it was effectively an officer's position in the past.
The past chair is technically not an officer, that is correct.
It's a member of the executive committee.
Yes,
Right.
they do have, you know, the authority of everybody else on the executive committee. They are not technically an officer, though. Do you follow?
Yes.
Okay. AJ?
So, in my mind, the way I see this is if we have a chair that we remove for whatever reason, or if we have a chair that leaves the party for whatever reason,
Right.
then that person would still be eligible as long as they serve 4 months to be on this board. And I don't know how to properly motion to correct that issue, but I really like it if someone else.
That's a fair point. Joelle, go ahead.
Just to reply to you, we've had this situation where we've had a chair removed and they still have the ability to come to executive committee meetings, and it has not caused a problem. You have to remember that there actually are 5 officers already there, and it's still valuable to get that person's input regardless of whether or not they've been removed from office.
see if anybody else has anything to say. George?
Would there be an objection to adding in the phrase "served in good standing"? Because if you were removed for cause.
Is that a specific motion that you were making?
It is.
Okay, so where do you want to?
Essentially, if you're, you can sit down because I'm speaking. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So where we're looking at the previous chair as being eligible for the position, as long as that chair served in good standing, or we can choose whatever phraseology we want for that.
Well, you've got to choose one now because you're making a motion. So.
In good standing is good.
So you want to insert the words "in good standing."
The problem is that it only has to be for 4 months in good standing, even if he ended up not in good standing,
Yeah.
if you put it in there.
After 8 years, add unless recalled.
Good.
That seems,
Is that okay?
Brian seems to have solved the issue by using the phrase "unless recalled." So I actually believe that is completely consistent with my intention.
Good.
Okay. So my understanding of the motion is that it is at the end of it, you add a comma, and then you say "unless recalled." Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this?
My only comment is that this is setting us up for a situation where we could get a tie, whereas before we didn't, and well, there'd be 5 officers of the state party plus the recent chair on the executive committee. So you get a tie.
You can have a tie now, so I mean,
With 5 members?
We currently have a 6-member AC.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
We're adding in the phrase, unless recalled. Is it implied that it's for cause, or would you need to actually specify that it would?
Recall provisions.
Officer recall.
We have recall provisions.
Right, so if we're putting that phrase, do we need to add for cause, or is it just fine as it is?
Well, I would say if they've been recalled, I would think it's for cause because it's gone through the judicial committee at that point.
Yeah.
I'm asking if it's implied.
So.
Gotcha.
So. Hey.
LPNH.
Okay, we have a motion to end debate.
Second.
Is there any objection to ending debate? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. The motion on the floor is to add add a comma in the words "unless recalled" to the end of subsection 2 of Part A of Part 2 of Section A of Article 7. So, all those in favor, please raise your voter cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voter cards. Okay, motion carries.
Point of information real quick, or actually this might be a point of order. We still have either 11 or 12 pages to go through. We've gone through 4 pages and we have roughly half an hour left scheduled for this. So if we could severely limit discussion, that would be amazing because I would like to actually wind up getting through all of the business that we have.
Okay. Your point is well taken. Okay. As long as there's no further discussion on Part 2, we're going to move to Part 3. This is essentially a quick reminder that, not a reminder, but a statement that the Executive Committee is in charge of the day-to-day operations of the party. They're the basic management unit of the party. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, moving to Part 4. This essentially sets up meeting requirements for the Executive Committee. Essentially, it mentions that they must meet at least 12 times a year, at least once per month. Also includes a provision regarding conducting business via what is called electronic methods of communication, which is a phrase that you'll see scattered throughout the bylaws. That is a phrase that allows flexibility as to whether it's, say, Google Hangouts or Skype or a conference on the phone or whatever it is. It's electronic methods of communication. It's a phrase that essentially gives the Executive Committee flexibility. So, also provides for emergency meetings if necessary. Also provides for a requirement on sending out the draft minutes and specifies a quorum as majority of the officers. Is there any discussion on part 4?
I would move to, in part A, remove.
Stu's been recognized. Sorry. So.
Throughout this article, executive committee, and F, or 4F, majority of the officers of the state party. Was that intentional, or did you intend to say majority of the executive committee?
That is intentional. The reason is in case the previous state chair is absent all the time for whatever reason or is not able to come, it specifies explicitly the officers. That wasn't intentional.
Because you can't recall the past chair.
So, Tom?
I would move in part A to change, alter, or eliminate the requirement for at least 12 times per year and at least once every month. There are and have been times when meetings are not scheduled on a monthly basis, that 12 meetings don't happen in a year. There can be any number of reasons to deliver less than 12 and simply have a requirement.
Are you proposing to simply delete that sentence entirely?
I am proposing to delete that sentence in its entirety.
Okay, motion is to delete the first sentence of part A. The sentence says the committee shall meet at least 12 times per year and at least once every month. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there further discussion? Like to speak on your motion anymore?
Just, again, sometimes it happens that we're not going to have a meeting for whatever reason, and to just have to call a meeting to meet this requirement is just kind of a waste of time.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Okay. I would only say that if that's the case for the specific date that you couldn't make, I don't see why you couldn't reschedule later in the month to have the once a month date scheduled and met. So I'm opposed to this amendment.
I will speak to the amendment. Over the last year, we've scheduled monthly meetings. I believe there was one instance where something happened, we didn't have quorum, and because of the day that the meeting was scheduled, we weren't able to wind up meeting during the month. This month, we wound up just canceling the meeting that was scheduled for 10 days ago because there was nothing to discuss. To specify a requirement that not only there be 12 meetings per year, but that they must be at least one every month. You know, as they say, life happens, and I am not opposed to having monthly meetings. I just don't think that it should necessarily be specified, because if something happens and the day that the meeting was supposed to be scheduled was the 28th of the month and nobody can meet until the 1st of the following month, then technically the EC is then in violation of the bylaws. And then what happens? The EC has to then call a convention or call the judicial committee and say, please punish us because we wound up violating. So I'm not opposed to having the meetings, I just don't think it needs to be specified as thus.
Yeah. Any further discussion on this amendment?
Motion to move to the previous question.
Okay, there's a motion to end debate.
Second.
Seconded. Is there any objection to ending debate? Hearing none, we will proceed to a vote. The motion on the floor is to amend Part A of Part 4 to delete the first sentence entirely. All those in favor, please raise your voter card. Okay, thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voter card. Okay, motion passes. So, any further discussion on Part 4? Okay. Moving on. Part 5 is just basically a really quick thing that says vacancies in the officers are specified by the provision that we discussed previously. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, moving on. Leadership Board. So, Part 1 simply states the purpose of the board. So, any discussion regarding the purpose of the Leadership Board?
Yeah.
I don't get it. So the purpose of the board is to oversee the executive committee?
Right. The board has the power to overrule the executive committee if needed. So the board is also there in part to establish strong communication with the affiliates and with the committees so that everybody knows what's going on. It's also a way to develop institutional knowledge. So it's only meeting 4 times a year.
So how do they oversee the executive committee if they only get together 4 times a year?
They can conduct votes via electronic methods of communication.
So are they sitting in on executive committee meetings? I mean, how are they?
They will get the minutes. They will get the minutes of the executive committee meetings. So.
I guess I feel like the executive committee is effectively acknowledging or empowering or creating the existence of affiliates. Then you're giving them power.
The affiliates are choosing their own chairs.
Representatives, not chairs.
Basically what it is, it's sort of a central committee of sorts. The idea for one is to strengthen the communication between the executive committee and the affiliates. The affiliates need to know what the executive committee is doing. The executive committee needs to know what the affiliates are doing. It is also to get updated reports from all the committee chairs, and that whatever their standing committees are. And basically it is a way to share, for one thing it's a way to share information, share what works, what doesn't work. It's a way to develop and preserve institutional knowledge. It's a way that affiliates can get their needs met, and they can, and it's also, it does provide certain powers, like, for example, the power to create special rules of order is a power of the board. It is not a power of the executive committee. And rules can govern the party, and that power is not delegated specifically to the executive committee, but the board does have that power because it's more representative of the party. So.
AJ went first.
So, AJ was first.
What's the question?
Okay. Well, there is no actual question. There's no motion on the floor, but so actually, unless the motion is to end debate on part 1, I suppose. Okay, fine. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection to moving on from part 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would move to eliminate.
Oh, the motion's out of.
Well, okay, then it's all.
So. All right. So we're on to part 2 of the leadership.
Well, no, he objected to ending discussion.
I'm sorry.
No, I will withdraw my objection.
Okay. Is there any other objection to closing debate on part 1? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to part 2. It requires that members of the board be officer eligible, members who are eligible to be officers. The basic eligibility requirement. Any discussion on this? Tom, if you want to make a motion to kill the electric board, you can do that.
Yeah, that's what
that will affect an awful lot of the bylaws that will.
I have we had one nominee for each executive committee member, and you have to have all the same requirements to be on the leadership board. I'm afraid that filling this board is going to be rather difficult. It is not easy to get people to volunteer for these types of positions.
Well, most of the positions are the committee chairs and the affiliate chairs.
Right. I can tell you we got slightly above 0 input from any affiliate chair for the last year.
Okay. This is a way to get better input from them.
No. Give us your input. Blank.
Right.
There's.
This forces the issue. This forces the executive committee and the affiliates to work together. That is part of the purpose of the board, to get better coordination between everyone.
Yes.
It's to force the affiliates to come and meet with the executive committee. So,
Have we voted on ending discussion? For part one?
We're on part 2 at the moment. So.
I mean,
Brian, go ahead.
Can I make a motion to accept the leadership board section B as a whole, or just argue it as a whole? Since it seems like we don't know whether or not we actually want a leadership board.
Is there any objection to considering part B as one paragraph?
Second.
All right, second. If there's hearing no objection, we'll consider the entire section B, leadership board, as one paragraph, and so it's all of part B is open to discussion.
I move to strike part B.
Okay, there's a motion to delete part B. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think I can appreciate that you have an idea about where this might be going, but without sort of any bigger picture discussion, and you've just also indicated that it affects several other things throughout the rest of the bylaws, and we as the standing member of the board can't even sort of envision what's going on. Like, I hate to even move forward with any of this with, again, additional meetings and reports and things from people that I can tell you in 20 years of party history, there's no precedent for anything like this.
I'm going to give a brief response, and basically what I'm going to say is if we're going to be a serious political party, we have to start acting like one. And part of that requires strong communication. It requires sharing what does and does not work. It requires accountability to each other. The executive committee should be accountable to all the affiliates, and the affiliates should be accountable to the executive committee. This was created in part to try and provide a mechanism for that accountability. It's to provide better communication, and I understand that it is hard to find volunteers. I am not disputing that at all. But I think this is important because it gives us a way to basically strengthen the party, to, as I said, improve the communications, to share the methods that work and methods that don't work. It's to have important discussions about strategy moving forward long term. It's to have all of those discussions, and it's to bring together the leaders of the party, be those the executive committee members, or the affiliate chairs, or the committee chairs, or whoever else.
There is a question of privilege.
Go ahead.
We have 25 minutes, and I don't know how many more pages left to go. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what are we going to do about this?
Work fast.
Yes. Other than run out of time, we have our convention rules and we have our agenda. So since we're out of time, we're out of time. I believe Brian was first.
We just adopted that the vice chair's rules are to communicate with affiliates.
Yep.
And so the affiliate communication will come through the vice chair's report. And that could substitute in the meantime while we grow.
Okay. So go ahead, Mr. Nass.
Can I speak in favor of this leadership board? In Wisconsin, where I just moved from, we had, as part of our executive committee, the representative elected from each affiliate to the state party. And what we found as we grew bigger as a party, as a state party, is that certain counties or cities, so it'd be like Southern New Hampshire, Seacoast New Hampshire, would have a overwhelming representation at the state convention when we're electing the executive chair. And by enabling the affiliates to have representation in the governance of our party, we can empower the smaller communities like Northern New Hampshire a little bit more in the long run. So as our party gets bigger, I think Chip's right, like, we're going to need to have better representation from our affiliates in this way.
I believe Brian's got something, and I think the place that we can move forward is to mandate communication from the regions, and that could be a two-way street from the EC to the affiliates and from the affiliates to the EC. I would have liked to have seen at least a requirement for a meeting every 90 to 120 days, but with Section A being struck, that's that. I think this is a valuable concept, and I tip my cheese hat to the young man from Wisconsin. Go Packers. However, the fact of the matter is we may not be ready for this year, and it is such a big undertaking to wrap our heads around. Maybe this should be tabled until our next convention, when we have been able to see how just a mandate to communicate to the affiliates works out.
Are you making a motion at this time, or just?
I don't know, Brian, were you a point of order, or were you a motion?
Yeah, speaking to.
He was just speaking to the motion.
To scrap it.
Yeah. The motion on the floor right now is to delete Part D, or Part B, excuse me, the leadership board, which would additionally require changing various other parts of the proposed bylaws as well.
Well, if you move to strike, you move to strike and reference to.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, yes, sir. I support the existence of a leadership board, having a structured way of having the affiliates and the EC is now more valuable than simply having the exchange of information, which still exists today. So I think we got
for this part.
Structured meeting, also being part of organizations that fell victim to the mentality that we're not ready for something, so let's not do it, and then not growing into it when it could have been a way of encouragement. I think we should address the topic on. I think we want it to be big enough, strong enough for this leadership board, so we can have it in-house.
We have less than 2 minutes to discuss this point. Is there any further discussion?
If there's no opposition.
Just really quickly, I do like the idea of getting more affiliates on board. The way this is written, it gives them veto power instead of including them in on the front end where the decision is made, like on the executive committee. New York State Board, for example, has affiliates actually on the state committee. I also think it would be difficult to get everybody to meet in a location within 15 miles of Concord. A quorum is required. It could be the officers on the executive committee making a decision and all the other members overturning it at the next meeting. It just sounds a little chaotic the way this is all written.
I mean, the part about meeting in person could be changed, certainly, later on, if we propose that. Is there any further discussion? Okay, the motion on the floor is to delete Part B, the leadership board, and I guess to delete all references to the leadership board throughout the proposed bylaws. All in favor, please signify by raising your voter cards. Count on this. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voter cards. Motion fails.
Division? That was 1/2, not.
The vote was 12 to 15. I counted.
And then George had a motion to table it, discussion of it.
So. George, regarding your motion to table, a motion to table a portion of this is not in order because we're considering the entire bylaws revision. Unless, are you motioning that we table the entire bylaws revision? Let me ask that.
No.
Okay. So, is there any further discussion on Part B, the leadership board?
Yes, I'm making a motion to amend 9B, the in-person meetings provision.
Okay.
My amendment is to move the words, to change the beginning to meetings conducted in person shall be at a location. So move the word shall be forward a few words.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying part B would read, meetings conducted in person shall be at a location?
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
And part 9, part B.
Object to the consideration of a question. We have time constraints in mind.
Okay, we have an objection to consideration of a question. To make a long story short, this is a motion where we kill this motion before we start discussion on it. So the question to the body of delegates is, should this question be considered? Should Rich's motion to amend be considered?
Isn't that a chair ruling issue?
No, it's a motion under Roberts specifically. So if you do not want to consider this, if you do not want to consider this amendment, you vote no. If you do want to consider this amendment, you vote yes. So all those in favor of considering this question, please raise your voter cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your voter cards. Motion fails. So, motion on the floor. Essentially, this motion on the floor, as I understand it, is to remove the requirement for in-person meetings, and say that if in-person meetings are held, they will be near Concord, essentially.
I'd like to speak in favor.
Okay.
Subsection C, which immediately follows, says that the board has the power to have electronic meetings. So it only makes sense that if you're giving them the power to have electronic meetings, that you don't then require them to meet in person to then pick up an electronic device.
Technically, it says conduct business between meetings, not electronic meetings, but, so, part C.
Okay, well, let's change that to electronic meeting.
Well, that's not on the floor right now. So, and
In favor.
Okay.
This came up at our affiliate meeting. This came up in discussion, realizing that you're requiring them to have a meeting in person in a location, and so to give the board more flexibility, if they met in person, it seemed like this location requirement was important enough so the bylaws committee could be in there. So I just want to make clear that only if they met in person did it have to be here, that they could have. Okay. The implication being that they can conduct business electronically or smoke signals or whatever the
required code.
Any further discussion?
Can we just say meetings shall be conducted at either within this location or electronic?
I think this takes care of that because we've got electronically is okay elsewhere.
Do you want me to read you back the motion?
It says electronic is okay.
That's between meetings.
Part C does not authorize electronic meetings. It simply says that they conduct business between meetings. The proposal to change Part
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.